Hello, Vudani here, and today I have a Guardian build. It's going to be using a sword in both main hands. One of those could be switched for a scepter, but I went with a full melee build here. It is incredibly offensive with a decent amount of defense. The slot skills this build focuses on is spirit weapons, and I'll talk about the slot skills. The first heal you use is Signet of Resolve. The main reason for that is the 10-second condition removal. Sword of Justice is your DPS spirit weapon, very useful. Hammer of Wisdom does a little damage but more for the knockdown. Hold the Line is a very good stun break, gives the protection. And for the ultimate, Tome of Courage is probably one of the best in the game. There are two types of situation you'll use your ultimate. The first is to heal yourself to full, and the second is to help allies. In the second situation, you'll use all your skills. From left to right, you have Heal Area, which is a spammable ground-targeted heal. You have Purifying Ribbon, which is going to bounce between allies and foes. It'll cleanse allies and blind foes. Protective Spirit will give protection and regeneration in a cone. Pacifism is a large point-blank AoE that will daze foes for 3 seconds, and Light of Deliverance is a full heal for you and up to 5 nearby allies. The traits in this spec are 30 Zeal, 30 Radiance, and 10 Valor. For the Valor tree, it's actually a pretty strong tree. If I could put 30 in it, I would. The critical damage is huge for one-hand weapons, but the reason I have 10 in this tree is for the condition removal. Later in the video I'll talk about an alternate spec that actually does utilize 30 points in Valor. Obviously the precision of the Radiance tree helps quite a bit for crits. This build is focused on getting crits. The condition damage helps a bit. It also has quite a few burns. As shown here with Inner Fire, when you're set on fire you gain Fury. That's going to give you 20% critical chance. Also you have the Spirit Weapon burn. That's going to help with damage a bit, but it's mostly for applying conditions, which is going to give you a bit of a damage boost. Also, the one-hand critical chance is the key. This is what makes this build good and what makes the one-hand sword and scepter so deadly. 15% critical chance, you will almost crit every hit. It's pretty insane. Next we have Zeal, which is going to give you a bit of a power boost, but the reason I'm going into this tree is for the spirit weapon abilities you'll get. You will lower the recharge on them by 20%, increase their damage by 10%, and most importantly, they will not be destroyed when you command them. And commanding them is going to be your biggest source of burst for the most part. The hammer is going to stun people and the sword is going to blast people. It can be rather difficult to control and use the spirit weapons, but if you can get them working for you, it's very effective. By using both of the command skills with the spirit weapons at the same time, you can knock the foe down and then do a significant chunk of their life in just a couple seconds. It's very effective for 1v2s and obviously a 1v1 it's overkill. I took fairly conservative gear choices with this. The Knight's Amulet is a good all-around amulet, both defensively and offensively, and it gives me the precision I need. The Runes of Divinity, a nice all-around rune. And for the weapons, I have the Superior Air and Fire on all of them, because critting pretty much every hit, the extra procs come in handy, and they do proc quite often. I feel like the Runes of Divinity are often underrated. It's honestly, for a crit build, probably the highest damage increase you can get. The 15% improved critical damage is very high. It's the highest runes will give you. And you get 60 precision and 60 to all your other stats. So not only is it very offensive, but it helps a bit for defense. The 3 main attacks you'll be using come from your sword, obviously. It's the focus of this build. Your auto attack is a 3-hit attack. It starts with Sword of Wrath, then to Sword Arc, then Sword Wave. Sword Wave is actually a conal attack that hits 3 times, and when all 3 hits on that crit, it is incredibly deadly. Flashing Blade is a teleport, and it has a very short 10-second cooldown. Where you may lack in chills and cripples, you certainly do not lack in mobility with this skill alone. The very short cooldown allows you to basically be on top of foes at all times. And Zealot's Defense is a skill that you can channel to block ranged attacks, and it also actually does a very significant amount of damage. It has a medium range of 600, but can be used in junction with the hammer knockdown skill to do quite a bit of burst. For your offhand, the first one you have is the Focus, and you'll have Ray of Judgment and Shield of Wrath. Ray of Judgment is going to be a chain skill that will damage and blind enemies, and allies will gain regeneration and lose condition, very similar to your ultimate skill. Shield of Wrath is going to block the next 3 attacks, and if the shield is not destroyed, it explodes, which actually does a pretty good chunk of damage. The shield is obviously a bit more defensive. You'll have Shield of Judgment and Shield of Absorption. Shield of Judgment is going to be a frontal AoE that will give protection to allies, up to 5 of them, and damage enemies. Shield of Absorption is going to put a small dome around you that will push foes back and absorb incoming projectiles. If you do plan on playing this build, the general strategy when you go into an encounter will to be, first of all, judge the numbers. If you are overwhelmed, you'll want to pop both spirit weapons and try to burst someone down. A combo I like to use is the stun with the hammer, the burst from the sword, and hit them with your number 3 ability to do a very, very large amount of damage. You can also hit your F1 to burn them, and oftentimes that will kill people. I don't believe it happens this match, but it definitely can. Also, keep in mind the use of your 2 non-spirit weapon utility skills. They have 2 purposes. The heal is cleansing you every 10 seconds, so pull down on that if you can. Sometimes just not healing will actually heal you more, and overall damage you can mitigate. And your other shout skill is 2 parts. It has the buffs for allies. It also has the stun break. In 1v1s, you'll probably want to hold on to that, but in larger group fights, the buffs you can give your allies will probably outweigh breaking a stun on yourself, as you are pretty durable. Here's actually a pretty good example of the shout skill being used for allies. As my allies rolled in, I popped that to help mitigate some damage and regenerate some health, which they certainly used. Another thing to discuss with this spec and Guardians in general are obviously their profession mechanic, their virtues. You have 3 of them: Virtue of Courage, Virtue of Justice, and Virtue of Resolve. The thing about them is they constantly apply their effects when they are not used, so obviously it's very situational because of that when you would use them. You're going to get burns from your first, heals from your second, and Aegis from your third. The active skills on them are basically just an enhanced version of them, but there is a trade-off. When they are on cooldown, they are not applying their passive effect, but using them will grant you an enhanced effect of that, so in times of defense or heal or damage, you may choose to pop them. One weakness this build does have is when people run from you, it can be very difficult to get your spirit weapons to attack them. However, there is an alternate spec that kind of counters that. Maybe not counters it, but certainly helps with that. If you were to go 10-30-30 rather than the 30-30-10 I've described in here. And with that build, you would be dropping spirit weapons and gaining 20% critical damage, and picking up a scepter for one of your weapon swaps. You'll keep the focus and shield, but the range attacks from the scepter can be useful for engaging and chasing people. The scepter offers 1200 range attacks as well as a 20-second cooldown immobilize, which would certainly help with either spec I'm talking about in this video. I'll go ahead and provide links to both of these builds in the description. As you can see in this video, this build offers pretty decisive 1v1s. A lot of Guardian specs will be very good at 1v1s, maybe not so much offensively as they outlast people. This build is very much not for outlasting people, although it does have fairly good survivability. You can see it, this Mesmer fight here, I can just tank it while my spirit weapons and my sword do work on them. It's I'd say it's a medium paced build. It's not too fast paced. You're mostly just slashing your sword. It's pretty easy to play. The difficulty comes with integrating your spirit weapons with your attacks. Also, one vulnerability of this build is being caught with a a good opponent and no spirit weapon as I stun this guy, and there you can see the 3 ability do some work on him. But another, you kind of see how the spirit weapons can be dodged. If a smart player sees you coming, he can very easily keep distance and run, which is why you really want to stick to the points and play the objectives. This build is not too good at chasing people down. If they're running from you, it's often a better decision to simply run away and go for a point or take cover. The most support this build offers is really in the ultimate with a Guardian. A lot of Guardian builds can get away with being basically designed for themselves, but picking up that Tome of Courage will really turn the tide of a group battle. You can see the durability of this build really showcased in this group fight. Not really a group fight, it's more like me versus the world, but I'm just surviving as long as I can. Hopefully I'll get a rally here. Gonna try to hold them off. And it doesn't really require your teammates' help, which is something I do like. A lot of my builds that I'll make for SPVP, I try to make them really self-dependent. If an SPVP build that requires teammates, you're often not going to get the help of your teammates. You really do see the effectiveness of the one-hand weapons with the Guardian. They have potential to put out some of the most damage in the game. Perhaps not the most, but certainly a lot. As always, I hope this video was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe, and test this build out. I hope it does you well, and thanks for watching.